Hey guys, welcome back to ScoutTube. My name is Pierce, I'm from BSA Troop 680, and today we're doing part 1 of our 3-part series on the Tenderfoot rank. Leave a like and subscribe to show your support. Without further ado, let's get into this. Requirement 1A goes as follows. Present yourself to your leader prepared for an overnight camping trip. Show the personal and camping gear you will use. Show the right way to pack and carry it. Now obviously you'll have to do this one on your own, but I'll walk you through the basics of packing a backpack. Packing a backpack is more complex than it looks, but with a little practice, it's an art that can be easily mastered. Here are a few things to consider before we begin. First, remember that you should pack your bag in order of ease of access. What this means is that you should make sure that the things you need to access often, like water, trail snacks, or your 10 essential survival kit, should be located either in outside pockets or near the top of your main pack compartment, whereas things that need to be accessed less often, such as your sleeping bag or clothes, can be relegated to a space deeper in your pack to make room for things that you need to access in a pinch. Additionally, keep in mind that the center of mass of your filled backpack should ideally be centered and as close to your lower back as possible, so make sure that the heavier things in your pack are deeper and closer to the strap side of the pack, and centered so that they don't throw you off balance. The obvious exception here is water, which should absolutely be placed in an outside pocket where it can be easily accessed. However, if you have a 1-liter water bottle on one side of your pack, consider placing a second 1-liter bottle on the other side to recenter your balance. With that said, let's go over what you will need. Now, remember that this is only a guide. You'll probably need more than this when you head out for your trip, and these are just the bare essentials. Also note that I am adjusting this packing list for a 2-day, 1-night outing, as mandated by the requirement. If you are heading out for a longer trip, I suggest you plan accordingly. Also consider the possible weather conditions all along your trip, taking into account that you may be at higher elevations where it's cold and windier, or in the desert where it is hotter and drier. For example, you may not need to bring rain gear if there's a 0% chance of rain all throughout. To start, we have our sleeping supplies. These are your tent, sleeping bag, and sleeping pad. These items are particularly heavy, so remember to properly balance them. Many packs have a pocket purpose-built for holding sleeping bags, and many sleeping bags come with a stuff sack, so make use of those features if you have them. As for your sleeping pad and tent, I suggest using the straps on the front side of the pack. However, due to the way my pack is set up, I will refrain from strapping these things on until after I've packed everything else, so I don't have to constantly take it off and put it back on. If you don't have an external pack cover to protect your bag and its contents from the rain, then I recommend using a typical garbage compactor trash bag as a waterproof liner inside your pack. You definitely don't want your sleeping gear or change of clothes to be wet when you're ready to go to sleep. Speaking of clothes, because this is simply a 1-night outing, I suggest only bringing a set of clean sleeping clothes, and you'll likely wear the same clothes on both days. Some may bring a second pair of socks and or underwear, but for a 2-day, 1-night trip, that's optional too. Your packed clothes should also have a warm layer in case the temperature drops at night. Beanie or trapper hats are great too in case you're expecting cooler temps. In any event, all your clothes should either be made out of synthetic, quick-dry materials or merino wool. Cotton is the worst, as it is slow to dry, does not retain heat when wet, and is very heavy, and can cause blisters. I encourage you to adjust and see what works for you as you gain experience going on overnight trips. Many of us keep all our clothes organized in a stuff sack, so that when you get to camp, you don't need to pull everything out to find that clean pair of socks that fell into the bottom corner of your pack. After that, include your mess kit, cooking tools, and eating supplies. Again, if you can keep all your cooking and eating utensils together in a stuff sack, this organization will save you tons of time when you reach camp and need to cook in the dark. Try finding your spoon if it's loose in your pack and made its way into the folds of your sleeping bag. Next, your toiletries. Include deodorant, dental hygiene products, bug spray, sunscreen, and toilet paper if you are camping in the backcountry. Oh, and you guessed it, your toiletries should be in its own stuff sack. Lastly, pack in other camping supplies, including your 10 essentials, paracord, and anything else required for your trip. Fill water bottles and strap on your tent and pad, and you'll be good to go. If you're going on a multi-day trip, the food that you won't be eating on that day can be packed into the bottom of your pack, right above your sleeping bag. Food is heavy, so you want it to be towards the bottom center of your pack. All other food that you will eat for the day while on the trail, such as trail snacks and maybe lunch, should be easily accessible so you don't need to completely unpack your pack to get to it. Requirement 1B requires you to go one step further than 1A, expecting you to sleep one night on an outing and to help pitch the tent you sleep in. Like in 1A, I can't do this for you, but I can offer some advice. For one, definitely be familiar with how to set up your tent. Try and pitch your tent 2 or 3 times before you leave for the overnight trip so that you can make sure you are confident in your ability to do so. And make a habit of double checking that all the tent parts like stakes, guy lines, poles, the tent itself, the rain fly, and a repair kit are all in the bag before you go off on your trip. If you are unaware of how to set up your tent, you can either consult your parents for help or you can take a peek at your tent's owner's manual, which will likely show you how to set it up. Also, try to pack gear that is appropriate for the conditions you expect to encounter on your trip. If your first trip is a backpack outing, you should look into lightweight stakes, poles, and tents. Additionally, if you are taking a 2-person tent on a high-intensity outing like a backpacking trip, make sure that at least 2 people sleep in that tent. Not only will your tenting partner make camp setup a breeze, but you can also split the weight of the tent, making for a more pleasant hiking experience. Perhaps one of you could take the rain fly and poles while the other takes the tent itself. However you set it up, making sure that all the space that can be safely and comfortably used is occupied makes for a far greater time for all. Other than that, get out there and camp. I'll see you on the trail. Requirement 1C asks for you to show how you practice the outdoor code on a camp out or outing. If you can't recall the outdoor code, I can't blame you. I'll go over it again before we continue. The outdoor code goes as follows. As an American, I will do my best to be clean in my outdoor manners, be careful with fire, be considerate in the outdoors, and to be conservation-minded. Now, ask yourself, how did I demonstrate one of these principles? For example's sake, perhaps you were clean in your outdoor manner by participating in a trash sweep to make sure you left no trace. Or maybe you were careful with fire by helping fill emergency water buckets in case things went wrong. The possibilities are endless, and you likely demonstrated one of these principles without even knowing it. 2A asks that you assist in preparing one of the meals while camping. It also asks for you to explain why it's important for all patrol members to share in meal preparation and cleanup. While you are on your overnight camping trip, I suggest you volunteer to help cook and clean to satisfy this requirement. In essence, the reason why it's important for all patrol members to participate in preparing and cleaning up meals on campouts is that everybody should have a job and a place in the process. Because if everyone's eating and everyone's making a mess, no one person should be stuck with the responsibility of cooking and cleaning for the group. That's the fastest way to get fighting among your patrol or sore feelings. Even though people may grumble that they have to help cook or clean, it is every scout's responsibility to pitch in to the collective effort from which they reap its rewards. This is where duty rosters come in handy. A duty roster is an assignment list which lays out whose job it is to do what throughout the outing, and a well-made duty roster switches people's duties around day to day to keep things fresh and fair. Duty rosters are important in this regard because they set out in advance who is doing what, when, and changes everyone's job periodically. No one is caught off guard when they are asked to do something, and everyone can see that the jobs are fairly distributed. 2B says, while on a campout, demonstrate the appropriate method of safely cleaning items used to prepare, serve, and eat a meal. Basically, on your next camping outing, you must demonstrate how to clean eating utensils and containers. Now, many troops have their own preferred ways to clean things, and I encourage you to learn your troop's method. But there's one method that our troop uses that has proven to be effective and simple. I'll give a quick demonstration of how it works. This method of cleaning, called the two-pot system, consists of pots. The first pot contains hot but not boiling water, with a few drops of biodegradable soap like camp suds. The second pot or bowl contains relatively cool to warm water. You can add a few drops of bleach to this pot if you really want to make sure you disinfect your dishes. Before you start washing dishes, the most important step is to ensure that each thing you are cleaning is completely licked clean. The bowls, plates, and utensils should not have any particles of food on them. So if someone drops off a plate with food still on it, tell them to lick it clean. This helps keep the pot of soapy water relatively food debris free. To clean, have one scout scrub each dish in the soapy water, then he passes it to the next scout to rinse it off in the plain water. Finally, let the dishes air dry. Requirement 2C asks why it's important that patrols eat together. Now, there are many reasons, and you can take your pick. But in my eyes, one of the most important reasons is that a patrol needs the mealtime in order to reflect on the day's work and plan for the next. Also, when patrols prepare, cook, eat, and clean together, it forms strong team bonds. Additionally, it's important for patrols to eat together because it minimizes the amount of space that needs to be cleaned after mealtime, and keeping eating areas clean is a must. Requirements 3A, 3B, and 3C mandate that you demonstrate the practical uses of the square knot, 2 half hitches, and taut line hitch. Because of this, I've prepared an example for each. As I go through the purposes of the knots, think about how their individual strengths can be applied to other situations you may encounter during your time hiking and camping. So now we're going to be tying up a clothesline. At camp, you will use a clothesline to dry off your clothes. So to tie a clothesline, we first tie a 2 half hitch to one tree. We do this because it's a very secure knot, so it will stay around the tree very tightly. Now, I realize that, wait, this line isn't long enough to get around both the trees. Have no fear, we can use a square knot to bind them. Nice and tight. And to finish the clothesline, we tie off a taut line hitch. We do this because the taut line hitch has the rare ability to actually tighten around the tree after it's tied. So we'll do that right now. And we're done. It's a little loose, but it works.
Next, 3D. Requirement 3D is all about tools. It says, demonstrate the proper care, sharpening, and use of the knife, saw, and axe. Describe when each should be used. Now, this question's material is based on the Tote and Chip course requirements, so if you have the Tote and Chip, you may skip this section if you wish. However, practice does make perfect, so stick around if you need any reminders. This here is a pocket knife. Its main uses are to cut and whittle. Typically, knives come with a few basic parts, with some having more or less than others. Most knives have a blade, a point, a handle, a nail notch, a pocket clip, and a retraction lever. To open the knife, simply swing the blade around the base until you hear a slight click, indicating that the blade is locked. To close, push the retraction lever down and bring the knife blade back to its starting position. There are two main ways to sharpen a pocket knife. You can either use a whetstone or a V-sharpener. To sharpen with a whetstone, wet the stone with either oil or water, the owner's manual will tell you which. Place the stone on a rag on a table so it won't slip, and slowly push the knife blade across at approximately a 25-degree angle. Do the same the other way to sharpen the other side. Make sure the stone is always wet while in use and properly dries afterwards. Sharpen with the coarse side, then the fine side. To sharpen with a V-sharpener, put the knife on the sharpener with the blade pointed toward the sharpening steel and slowly pull towards yourself. As before, make sure you do this in both directions and with the coarse side before the fine. Now, A few notes on how this knife is to be used. The knife is made exclusively for cutting and whittling objects, not for chopping and sawing, and certainly not as a throwing knife. And don't use it against something it clearly can't cut, such as rock or metal. So, to make sure everyone stays safe, keep your knife sharp, as a sharp knife is actually safer than a dull one. Additionally, never walk around with an open blade. If you must move around, make sure to close up the knife or sheath it. Finally, to make sure that the area is safe to whittle in, hold your knife outwards with an outstretched arm by the blade and slowly trace a circle in the air while spinning your body. This clearance area is called the blood circle. If it physically can't touch anything while you spin around, then you're good to go. This concept is now referred to as the safe cutting area. Note that this safety rule applies to different tools in different ways. Now on to the topic of saws. There are many different types of saws, but the one you are most likely to encounter is the bow saw, so that is the one we will cover here. This actually isn't a bow saw, but it's fine. Bow saws are fairly standard in design and consist of 4 parts: the frame, or bow, the blade, the handle, and the tensioner. Each of the parts work as they sound they would. You hold the saw by the handle, the blade cuts, the tensioner is used to keep the blade in place and under tension, and the frame holds it all together. The saw acts as you imagine it would. Put the blade against what you want to cut and push and pull with an even downward pressure until the log splits. Saws are a bit different than pocket knives in one main aspect. You don't typically ever sharpen most saws. Technically, they do make saw sharpeners called diamond bit sharpeners that you can buy for $30 or so. But the problem with those is you can't sharpen the entire blade at once. You need to sharpen every individual tooth. Instead of spending 10 hours sharpening your saw bits, it's a much more practical idea to simply buy a new blade, which are sold for cheap at every hardware store anywhere. To change the blade, loosen the tensioner on your saw until the blade slips off. Insert the new blade and tighten the tensioner. It is suggested that you keep your blades loose when not in use, and tight enough not to move, but loose enough to bend slightly while in use to preserve its lifetime. The safety rules for a saw are very similar to that of a pocket knife. Don't saw anything that clearly shouldn't be sawed, and make sure your blood circle is clear before use. Additionally, you may want to consider wearing protective gloves when using a bow saw, as the blade could pop out of the log while sawing and you want to protect your hands. Next, axes. Axes have many parts, which are the toe, the bit, the heel, the cheek, the shoulder, the throat, the grip, and the hand knob. To swing an axe, put your dominant hand below the shoulder and your non-dominant hand at the grip. Hold it at your side. When ready to chop, put the axe above your head and swing it downwards. As you swing, slide your dominant hand down the handle until it sits above your other hand at the point of impact. To sharpen an axe, you need to use a file instead of a sharpening stone. Clamp your axe sideways to a table and run a file down the cutting edge the same way you would with a pocket knife. Then flip it over and do it again on the other side. Now, safety. When using an axe, you have to be super aware of your environment. Make sure there is no brush 6 feet above you, and make sure that there is nothing you don't intend to chop 20 feet in front and behind you. Your blood circle when handling an axe is much larger since the axe could go flying if you lost your grip on it somehow. Keep your feet shoulder width apart to keep from whacking yourself in the legs. When transporting an axe, carry it under the axe shoulder and at your side with the blade facing away from you and others you may be walking with. If you have an axe sheath, use it.
Thanks for watching part 1 of our 3-part series on the Tenderfoot rank. Leave a like and subscribe down below to show your support, and stay tuned for part 2, in which we will be covering Requirement 4.